The first encounter. The ground shook as the alien war machines advanced across the scorched battlefield. Towering above the human soldiers, the war machines were a terrifying display of power. The Ikar, a race of advanced warriors, had arrived on Earth with absolute confidence in their victory. They believed humans, with their primitive weapons and fragile bodies, would scatter like frightened animals. Commander Kinox, the Ikar leader, stood at the front, his 4 eyes scanning the horizon with calm assurance. His mandibles clicked in anticipation of the victory he was certain would come. On the other side of the battlefield, Captain Mark Briggs, a seasoned veteran, stood with a calm and determined expression. His face, hardened by years of combat, showed no fear. "Hold the line," he shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. His soldiers, a mix of veterans and fresh recruits, readied their weapons. They had heard tales of the Ikar's brutal conquests, but fear was not an option. This was their home, and they would fight for it. The Ikar war machines opened fire, sending waves of plasma searing through the air. Explosions rocked the ground, and the intense heat scorched the landscape. The human soldiers held their ground, firing back with everything they had. Their weapons were far less advanced than the alien technology, but their resolve made up for it. Private Jackson, barely 18, fired his rifle with trembling hands. His heart pounded in his chest, but he remembered his training. "Aim for the joints." Sergeant Morales yelled next to him. Jackson adjusted his aim and squeezed the trigger, hitting one of the Ikar war machines in a weak spot. The alien machine stumbled, and Jackson fired again, striking it in the eye. The war machine collapsed, and Jackson couldn't believe what he'd just done. Across the battlefield, Commander Kinox watched in disbelief as his forces encountered resistance they hadn't expected. The humans weren't running. They weren't surrendering. They were fighting with a determination that defied all logic. Kinox had never seen anything like it. The battlefield was a chaotic mess of smoke, fire, and blood. The alien war machines continued their relentless advance, but the humans held their ground, refusing to give an inch. Captain Briggs barked orders, his voice steady and commanding amidst the destruction. "Concentrate fire on their weak points. Don't let up." His soldiers obeyed without hesitation, their actions coordinated and precise despite the chaos around them. Commander Kinox, observing the battle from his vantage point, felt a growing sense of unease. The humans were not reacting as expected. They were supposed to be panicking, retreating in the face of overwhelming firepower. But instead, they fought with ferocity, their primitive weapons somehow managing to find the weaknesses in the Ikar machines. Private Jackson, now emboldened by his earlier success, continued to fire at the advancing war machines. Beside him, Sergeant Morales provided cover fire, his experienced hands steady and sure. "Keep your head down, kid. We're not done yet," Morales said, his voice calm despite the explosions around them. From the rear lines, human artillery opened up, sending massive shells crashing into the alien forces. The war machines, once thought invincible, began to falter under the relentless bombardment. Pieces of metal and alien limbs were scattered across the battlefield, the once organized alien force now appearing vulnerable. Kinox's confidence began to waver. His forces were taking heavy losses. The humans, despite their inferior technology, were proving to be more resilient than he had anticipated. His 4 eyes narrowed as he analyzed the situation, trying to understand how these creatures, so primitive by Ikar standards, were able to inflict such damage. Captain Briggs took a moment to survey the battlefield. His heart raced, but he kept his mind focused. The Ikar were formidable, but not invincible. They had weaknesses, and the humans were exploiting them. "Artillery, keep pounding their lines. Riflemen, concentrate on the flanks," he ordered, his voice a steady anchor in the storm of battle. The human soldiers pressed on with renewed determination, their bond as a fighting force growing stronger with every passing minute. They knew the odds were stacked against them, but they also knew they had something the Ikar didn't: human ingenuity and an unbreakable will to survive. The sun hung low on the horizon, casting a dim, reddish glow over the battlefield, now transformed into a scene of devastation. Burned-out war machines lay scattered like the carcasses of fallen beasts, their metallic skeletons twisted and torn apart by human artillery and sheer determination. The air was thick with smoke, and the once lush land had been reduced to scorched earth. Yet, amid the wreckage, both humans and Ikar warriors continued their desperate struggle. Commander Kennox stood atop a ridge, watching the unfolding chaos. His mandibles twitched in frustration as he observed his once dominant war machines faltering under the relentless human assault. The humans were supposed to have been broken by now, their defenses shattered, their spirits crushed. But they had not broken. Instead, they fought back harder with each passing hour, their numbers seeming to swell despite the losses they had sustained. Kennox had never encountered a species like this before. They had conquered countless worlds, and no species had ever resisted for this long, especially one as technologically inferior as humanity. He could not comprehend how humans, with their primitive weapons and fragile bodies, were holding their ground. This defied all logic, all tactical calculations. "Deploy the assault drones," finally commanded, his voice cold and measured, masking the uncertainty he now felt. The assault drones had been held in reserve, intended as the final decisive blow to crush any remaining human resistance. Sleek, fast, and deadly, these drones were designed for rapid infiltration, equipped with advanced targeting systems and plasma cannons capable of tearing through any human defense. The drones launched from the Ikar's rear lines like a swarm of locusts, cutting through the air with a high-pitched whine. They moved swiftly across the battlefield, weaving through the smoke and debris, avoiding artillery fire and anti-aircraft guns with ease. Their sleek black frames reflected the dim light, making them appear as shadows fitting through the chaos. Captain Mark Briggs saw the drones approaching from his position on the front lines. His heart sank. He knew exactly what they were: assault drones, feared for their speed and lethal efficiency. They could slip past defenses before anyone had time to react, striking down soldiers with surgical precision. "Damn it, they're sending in the drones," Briggs muttered under his breath, his eyes narrowing as he assessed the situation. His mind raced, searching for a solution. The drones were fast, too fast for the heavy artillery, and too small for the anti-aircraft guns to target effectively. If they reached the human lines, they could tear through the remaining soldiers in. Briggs raised his voice, shouting above the roar of battle. "Everyone, focus fire on those drones. They're fast, but if they get close enough, we can bring them down." The human soldiers, weary and battered, but still standing, shifted their attention. Private Jackson, his hands trembling from fatigue, looked up and saw the black shapes approaching like a storm of death. His breath caught in his throat, fear twisting his insides. "What the hell are those?" he muttered to Sergeant Morales, who was crouched next to him, wiping sweat from his brow. "Trouble," Morales replied grimly. "But nothing we can't handle. Just aim straight and keep your head down." The drones swooped in, dodging fire with impossible agility, their plasma cannons glowing with deadly energy. The first wave opened fire, sending searing bolts of plasma through the air. Several human soldiers were hit, their bodies vaporized instantly by the intense heat. Screams of pain and panic echoed through the lines as the drones descended like predators. Private Jackson gripped his rifle, aiming at one of the drones as it zipped through the air. His hands were shaking, his arms felt like lead, but he forced himself to focus. He pulled the trigger, his shot going wide as the drone veered away. "Damn it," he cursed, adjusting his aim. Beside him, Morales fired a well-placed shot, hitting one of the drones in its propulsion unit. The drone sputtered, its sleek frame losing balance before it crashed into the ground in a fiery explosion. "That's how you do it, kid," Morales said with a tight grin, though his face was lined with exhaustion. "Now, keep shooting." The human soldiers concentrated their fire on the incoming swarm. Bullets ricocheted off the drone's armored exteriors, but the occasional shot found its mark. Each time a drone was hit in a weak spot, its propulsion, targeting systems, or energy core, it exploded in a brilliant flash, raining debris down onto the battlefield. The sky became a deadly dance as drones zipped between explosions, weaving through the human defense lines. One drone aimed directly for Briggs' command position, its plasma cannon charged and ready. Briggs saw it coming, his heart pounding in his chest. He braced himself, knowing he wouldn't be able to dodge the shot in time. At the last second, a well-aimed shot from a nearby soldier hit the drone square in its targeting system. The drone jerked violently off course, spinning out of control before crashing into the ground, its plasma cannon firing harmlessly into the dirt. Briggs exhaled sharply, nodding in silent thanks to the soldier who had saved his life. But despite their efforts, the drones kept coming. For every one that was shot down, 2 more seemed to take its place. The human lines were beginning to falter under the relentless assault, their ammunition running low and their bodies exhausted from hours of fighting. Kinnox, watching from his vantage point, allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The drones were doing their job, cutting through the human ranks like a blade through water. He had underestimated these creatures before, but now they were finally beginning to fall. The battle would be over soon, and the Akar would claim their victory. But just as Kinnox began to believe that the tide had turned, something unexpected happened. The humans, instead of retreating in the face of the drone onslaught, began to adapt once again. Briggs ordered his soldiers to regroup, forming tighter defensive positions and using the wreckage of the fallen war machines as cover. Snipers took up positions in the debris, picking off drones with precise shots, while engineers rigged makeshift traps from the destroyed machines' parts. The human artillery, once focused on the larger war machines, now shifted its aim, lobbing shells directly into the swarm of drones. The explosions sent shockwaves through the air, catching drones in their deadly blasts and sending fragments of shrapnel tearing through their delicate systems. Private Jackson, adrenaline surging through his veins, fired again and again, his rifle now feeling like an extension of his body. Each shot was more accurate than the last, and he managed to take down 2 drones in quick succession. Around him, his fellow soldiers fought with a renewed sense of determination. They were tired, outgunned, and outnumbered, but they refused to give up. "They just don't know when to quit, do they?" Morales said with a grim smile, firing at another drone. Jackson nodded, his face set in determination. "Neither do we," he replied, his voice filled with newfound confidence. As the last light of day faded into night, the battle reached a fever pitch. The sky was alive with fire and smoke, the sound of explosions and gunfire drowning out all other noise. Yet, despite the overwhelming odds, the human soldiers continued to hold their ground, refusing to be broken. Kinnox, now pacing nervously, could not believe what he was seeing. The humans should have been wiped out by now. His drones should have torn through their lines like tissue paper. But somehow, impossibly, the humans were still fighting, and they were winning. For the first time, a seed of doubt crept into Kinnox's mind. Could these humans actually defeat the Akar? The tide of battle was shifting once again, and this time, it seemed to be in favor of the humans. Humanity's Counter-Strike, extended version. The night had fallen, blanketing the battlefield in darkness. Fires flickered across the landscape, casting eerie shadows over the twisted wreckage of war machines and human defenses alike. The stench of burning metal and scorched earth filled the air, mingling with the acrid smoke that rose in thick plumes. Despite the devastation, the battle raged on, illuminated by sporadic flashes of gunfire and the fiery bursts of explosions. Captain Mark Briggs stood near the makeshift command center, his eyes scanning the battlefield through a pair of night vision goggles. His face was etched with exhaustion, but his mind was still sharp, focused. The relentless drones had finally thinned out, but the cost had been high. Hundreds of human soldiers lay dead or wounded, and their supplies were dangerously low. Still, they had managed to hold the line, something no one had believed possible just days before. Behind him, Lieutenant Harper approached, her face grim. "Sir, we're down to our last reserves of ammunition. We've salvaged what we could from the fallen drones and the wreckage, but it's not enough to hold out much longer." Briggs nodded, not surprised but deeply concerned. "How are the wounded?" "Overwhelmed," Harper replied. "The medics are doing everything they can, but without proper supplies and rest, it's only a matter of time before we start losing more." Briggs clenched his jaw, turning to survey the distant ridge where the command forces were likely regrouping. They hadn't sent in another wave yet, but it was only a matter of time. He could feel it in his bones. They were planning something, waiting for the right moment to strike again, this time with even more devastating force. "What's our best option, sir?" Harper asked, her voice soft but steady. The fatigue in her eyes mirrored the collective weariness of every soldier still standing. Briggs stared at the horizon for a moment, weighing his options. There was no retreat, no fallback position. They had dug in deep here, and if they lost this position, they would have a clear path to Earth's last remaining defenses. They had to do something bold, something they wouldn't expect. "We go on the offensive," Briggs said quietly, almost as if testing the idea himself. Harper blinked, startled. "Offensive, sir, with what?" "Everything we've got left," Briggs said, turning to face her fully. "It's risky, I know. But we've been playing defense this whole time, waiting for them to break us. They're not expecting us to attack. If we strike hard now, we might catch them off guard." Harper hesitated, then nodded slowly, her respect for Briggs overriding any doubts she might have had. "I'll gather the squad leaders." Briggs watched her disappear into the night, then turned back to the ridge. It was a long shot, but they didn't have any other options. The Akar were too powerful, too entrenched. But if there was one thing Briggs had learned from fighting alongside these soldiers, it was that humans were at their best when their backs were against the wall. Across the battlefield, Kennock stood in the Akar command post, his clawed hands resting on the smooth, glassy surface of the tactical display. His compound eyes reflected the holographic map of the battlefield, each point of light representing a surviving human or Akar unit. The human resistance had proven far more formidable than he'd anticipated, but remained confident. The next strike would be there. His adjutant, an officer named, approached and saluted crisply. "Commander, the final wave of assault drones is prepared. We can begin the operation on your command." Kennox nodded, but did not give the order just yet. Something was bothering him, gnawing at the back of his mind. He had fought countless battles, conquered entire worlds, but this one felt different. These humans, they fought like cornered animals, unpredictable and vicious. Their resilience had already cost the far more than he was willing to admit. Yet, they lacked the technology to pose a true threat, or so he kept telling himself. "Do it," finally commanded. "Send in the drones, but keep our heavy artillery in reserve. I want them crushed before dawn." Briggs stood in front of his assembled officers, a grim smile playing on his lips. The ragtag group of soldiers, many of them exhausted beyond belief, listened as he outlined the plan. It was audacious, and that was exactly why it might work. "We don't have the firepower to hold them off forever," Briggs said, his voice clear but low. "But if we hit them where it hurts, right in the heart of their command, we can end this. Their drones are controlled from a central hub, somewhere behind their lines. If we can take that out, they'll lose control of their entire drone army." The soldiers exchanged glances, some nodding in silent agreement, others clearly worried. They had superior technology, overwhelming numbers, and air support. But they had something that didn't: human ingenuity and the ability to think outside the box. "We're going to use the drones they sent against us," Briggs continued. "We've scavenged parts from the wreckage, rigged them with explosives, and managed to hack into some of their systems. Our engineers think they can make it work." Harper stepped forward, holding up a small device, a drone interface module, now modified for human use. We can control a handful of their drones remotely. Not many, but enough to make a difference. We'll guide them right into their command structure and detonate them. Briggs surveyed his soldiers, their eyes reflecting the flickering firelight. It's not going to be easy, but if we pull this off, we can stop them here and now. The soldiers stood straighter, the flicker of hope in their eyes growing brighter. They had been through hell, but they hadn't broken. And now, they had a chance to turn the later. As the Ikar prepared for their final assault, a strange hum filled the air. Kinox, in his command center, stiffened, his mandibles twitching in confusion. His tactical display showed movement, drones, but not the ones he had ordered to launch. "What is this?" Kinox demanded, leaning closer to the display. The drones were flying toward the Ikar command post, but they weren't following the standard flight paths. Before he could issue an order, the drones dove down, straight toward the central hub. There was a brief moment of eerie silence before the sky lit up in a massive explosion, the shockwave rattling the ground and sending a plume of fire and debris shooting into the sky. Was thrown back, his vision blurring as alarms blared throughout the command post. Rushed over, panic in his eyes. "Commander, the drones, our control systems, they've been compromised." Kinox struggled to his feet, rage boiling in his chest. "Impossible," he snarled. "The humans." "They used our own drones against us," Seraph interrupted, his voice strained with disbelief. "Our entire drone army is offline." Kinox's mind raced. How had the humans done this? How had they turned the tide so completely? His drones, his most advanced weapon, had been rendered useless, and now the humans were advancing, taking advantage of the confusion. Briggs, leading the charge from the front, raised his rifle as the Ikar forces began to falter. "Push forward," he shouted. "This is our chance. Take the ridge." The human soldiers surged ahead, their spirits rekindled by the sight of the crippled Ikar command. For the first time in days, they had the upper hand. They moved swiftly, exploiting every weakness in the Ikar lines, driving their enemy back. As dawn broke over the horizon, the battlefield was silent except for the distant hum of human machinery and the soft moans of the wounded. The Ikar forces had been routed, their command shattered, their drones disabled. The humans, against all odds, had won. Briggs stood at the top of the ridge, surveying the wreckage of the Ikar command post. His soldiers, battered but alive, gathered around him. They had done the impossible. They had turned the tide of a war they were never supposed to win. "We're not done yet," Briggs said quietly to Harper, who stood beside him, her uniform stained with dirt and blood. "This was just one battle, but we've shown them what humanity is capable of." Harper nodded, her face set with determination. They won't forget it. As the first rays of sunlight bathed the battlefield in golden light, the soldiers of Earth stood victorious. They had been underestimated, outgunned, and outmatched, but in the end, it was their resilience, their creativity, and their sheer will to survive that had carried the day. The war was far from over, but humanity had struck back, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The conflict between the humans and the alien invaders had reached a critical juncture. The initial skirmishes had been marked by a series of shocking defeats for the invaders, each one more humiliating than the last. But now the aliens were regrouping, the command structure reasserting control, and the battles were becoming fiercer. In the heart of the conflict zone, Commander Elena Vasquez of the United Earth Defense Force stood at the helm of the newly upgraded Valiant, a battleship that had become a symbol of human resilience. Her crew, a mix of seasoned veterans and brilliant newcomers, was focused and ready. They had turned the tide in multiple engagements, but the real test lay ahead. The alien forces, led by General Thrax of the Zorgon Coalition, were preparing a massive offensive. Thrax, a hulking figure with a reputation for ruthlessness, had underestimated humanity's resolve and ingenuity. His forces were now assembling for what was to be the final push to subdue Earth. As the alien fleet emerged from their staging area, Commander Vasquez and her team monitored the situation from their command center. The alien ships, sleek and menacing, moved with a precision that spoke of advanced technology and strategic planning. Yet, the humans were not daunted. They had learned from their previous encounters, adapting their strategies and technologies with each engagement. "Admiral, the Zorgon fleet is advancing," reported Lieutenant Jameson, her tactical officer. "We've detected a concentration of their forces targeting our outer defenses. They're planning a multi-pronged attack." Commander Vasquez nodded, her mind racing through the tactical options. The Valiant was equipped with the latest advancements in human technology, including the experimental phase disruptors and quantum shields, but the true advantage lay in their unpredictable tactics. "Prepare for a full-scale engagement," she ordered. "We'll lead the counter-offensive. I want every ship ready and every crew member at their stations. This is the moment we've been preparing for." As the human fleet moved to intercept the alien forces, the battle began in earnest. The skies were filled with the chaotic brilliance of energy beams and missile trails. The Valiant maneuvered with agility, its phase disruptors slicing through alien shields and armor with devastating precision. Despite the technological edge, the battle was far from easy. The Zorgon Coalition's ships were formidable, and their commanders were skilled. The fighting was intense, with ships on both sides sustaining heavy damage. But the humans had something the aliens lacked: an unwavering determination and a will to fight for their survival. On the bridge of the Valiant, the crew worked in perfect harmony. Lieutenant Jameson coordinated the fleet movements, while Ensign Garcia operated the advanced targeting systems. Commander Vasquez, at the center of it all, made split-second decisions that turned the tide of the battle. "Direct hit on their command ship," Garcia announced. "The Zorgon flagship is losing power." "Keep the pressure on them," Vasquez commanded. "We need to cripple their coordination and break their morale." The human fleet pressed the attack, targeting key enemy ships and disrupting their formations. Slowly but surely, the Zorgon forces began to falter. The once proud alien fleet, confident in their superior technology, was now reeling under the relentless human assault. General Frax, watching from his command ship, was enraged and baffled. He had underestimated the human capacity for resistance, and now his forces were on the brink of collapse. His attempts to regroup were met with fierce resistance from the humans, who were determined to make this battle their turning point. As the battle raged on, a critical moment arrived. The Zorgon flagship, heavily damaged and struggling to stay operational, was on the verge of being destroyed. The human forces concentrated their fire, launching a final decisive assault that shattered the alien ship's defenses. With a resounding explosion, the Zorgon flagship was reduced to debris. The remaining alien ships, demoralized and leaderless, began to retreat. The human fleet, battered but victorious, pursued them, ensuring that the invaders would not easily return. In the aftermath of the battle, the human forces regrouped and assessed the damage. The victory was hard-won, and the cost had been high, but the message was clear. Humanity was not to be underestimated. The Zorgon Coalition had learned this lesson the hard way, and the tides of war had shifted, the aftermath and the new threat. The victory over the Zorgon Coalition marked a significant turning point in humanity's struggle for survival. The Zorgon retreat was a clear sign that Earth had defended itself against a formidable enemy, but the war was far from over. The fallout from the battle left both Earth and the invaders in a state of uneasy transition. In the wake of the decisive confrontation, Earth's defense forces began to regroup and rebuild. Commander Elena Vasquez and her crew aboard the Valiant were hailed as heroes, but the reality of their situation demanded more than just celebration. The damage to their ships, the loss of lives, and the ongoing threat of alien aggression required immediate attention. The command center on Earth was a hive of activity. Engineers, medics, and strategists worked around the clock to repair and reinforce the fleet, while leaders and diplomats prepared for the next phase of the conflict. The victory had proven human resilience, but it had also revealed the depth of the threat humanity faced. At the United Earth Defense Force headquarters, Commander Vasquez met with her senior staff to discuss the next steps. The mood was a mix of cautious optimism and sober realism. The recent battle had demonstrated the strength of human ingenuity, but it had also shown that the Zorgon coalition was not the only threat in the galaxy. "Commander," began Lieutenant Jameson, "the recent battle has given us a temporary advantage, but we must prepare for the possibility of other factions seeking to exploit our weakened state. The Zorgons weren't operating alone, and we've detected increased activity from several other alien races." Vasquez nodded, her gaze steady. "We can't afford to rest on our laurels. We need to ensure our defenses are robust and start gathering intelligence on any new threats. We've shown that we can win battles, but we must be prepared for a protracted war." As the team worked on their strategies, new intelligence reports began to arrive. They revealed that the Zorgon coalition was merely a part of a larger network of interstellar factions with varying interests and agendas. Some were hostile, others neutral, and a few were potentially sympathetic to Earth's plight. Among the most troubling reports was a message intercepted from a faction known as the Arcturians. The Arcturians were a technologically advanced race with a reputation for ruthless efficiency. Their message hinted at their interest in Earth's recent conflict and their potential involvement in future hostilities. "Commander, the Arcturians are known for their strategic cunning and their advanced technology," warned Lieutenant Jameson. "If they decide to engage, we could face a new level of difficulty." Vasquez took a deep breath. "We'll need to reach out to our allies and strengthen our alliances. It's clear that this is no longer just a fight for survival. It's a fight for our place in the galaxy." The United Earth Defense Force began diplomatic efforts to establish contact with other alien races that might offer support or neutrality. The goal was to create a coalition of sympathetic species that could help counterbalance the aggressive factions like the Arcturians. In the meantime, Earth's scientists and engineers worked on upgrading their technology to stay ahead of potential adversaries. The Valiant's crew, along with other ships in the fleet, participated in rigorous training exercises to prepare for any new threats. The focus was not just on maintaining their current capabilities, but on pushing the boundaries of human innovation. Commander Vasquez was deeply involved in these efforts, balancing her time between strategy meetings, diplomatic discussions, and overseeing the technical advancements. She knew that every decision she made would impact the future of humanity's place in the galaxy. One evening, as she reviewed the latest reports in her quarters, she received a transmission from an unexpected source, a previously unknown alien race known as the Voltorans. The Voltorans were an enigmatic species, shrouded in mystery and rumored to be neutral in the ongoing galactic conflicts. The message from the Voltorans was brief but intriguing. It suggested a meeting to discuss potential cooperation against common threats. The Voltorans claimed to have valuable intelligence about the Arcturians and other factions that could be crucial for Earth's defense. Vasquez reviewed the transmission with a mixture of curiosity and caution. Meeting with the Voltorans could be a gamble, but it was a risk worth taking if it meant gaining an advantage against the growing list of potential adversaries. Lieutenant Jameson, prepare a delegation for a diplomatic mission to meet with the Voltorans, Vasquez ordered. "We need to explore every avenue for potential allies and gather as much information as we can." As the preparations for the meeting began, the tension within the United Earth Defense Force was palpable. The recent victory had bolstered morale, but the knowledge of new threats and the complexity of interstellar diplomacy added layers of uncertainty to their situation. The day of the meeting arrived, and the delegation, led by Commander Vasquez, traveled to the designated location for the diplomatic encounter. The Voltoran emissaries awaited them at a remote space station, a sleek and technologically advanced facility orbiting a distant planet. The meeting was tense but productive. The Voltorans, with their inscrutable demeanor and advanced technology, shared valuable intelligence about the Arcturians and other factions. They revealed that the Arcturians were preparing for a major offensive and that their alliance with other races could spell disaster for Earth if not countered effectively. In return for their cooperation, the Volterans sought assurances of mutual respect and potential collaboration in research and technology. The negotiations were complex, but both sides recognized the need for a united front against common enemies. As the meeting concluded, Commander Vasquez felt a renewed sense of determination. The challenges ahead were formidable, but Earth was no longer facing them alone. With new allies and enhanced technology, humanity was better positioned to confront the threats that lay ahead. Returning to Earth, Vasquez and her team prepare for the next phase of their struggle. The battle with the Zorgon coalition had been a significant victory, but it was only the beginning of a larger conflict. The knowledge gained from the Volterans and the continued advancements in technology would be crucial as they faced the evolving threats of the galaxy. The fight for humanity's place in the cosmos was far from over, but with each victory and every alliance forged, Earth moved one step closer to securing its future among the stars. Commander Vasquez, surveying the wreckage and the triumphant faces of her crew, knew that this battle was more than a mere military victory. It was a testament to human resilience and ingenuity. The aliens had come to Earth expecting easy conquest, but they had encountered something far more formidable: the unyielding spirit of humanity. As the Valiant and the rest of the fleet returned to Earth, the news of their victory spread quickly. The people of Earth, inspired by their defenders' bravery and tenacity, celebrated their heroes and prepared for the next phase of the conflict. The battle was over, but the war was far from finished. The Zorgon coalition, now fully aware of the strength and resolve of humanity, would have to rethink their strategies. And as for Commander Elena Vasquez and her crew, they were ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. They had proven that, when it came to defending their home, humans could achieve the unthinkable.